The jackhammer stopped abruptly. The construction worker staggered back, eyes widening as he signaled frantically to his supervisor. They'd been hired to clear the old athletic grounds at Ridgewood College, making way for a modern complex that would finally erase the shadow that had hung over the campus for 8 years. "There's something under here," the worker shouted over the idling machinery. "Looks like a door." By noon, they had excavated enough to reveal what should not have existed: a concrete entrance, perfectly preserved beneath 6 feet of packed dirt. A locker room door with Ridgewood Tigers emblazoned across peeling blue paint. Coach Benjamin Davis arrived 30 minutes after receiving the call. He hadn't set foot on campus since the inquiry had ended and the case was filed away, unsolved but presumed tragic. 8 years had weathered him. What had once been salt and pepper hair was now entirely gray, and the confident stride he'd once carried across the sidelines had been replaced by a cautious shuffle. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, staring at the door. This wasn't in any building. "Plans?" The construction foreman shook his head. "According to our surveys, there shouldn't be anything here. Just solid ground beneath the old practice field." Davis stepped forward. His hand trembled as he placed it on the rusted handle. "Coach," the campus security officer warned, "maybe we should wait for—" But Davis was already pulling. The door resisted, then gave with a terrible groan. Stale air rushed out, carrying the unmistakable scent of sweat and something coppery and wrong. Davis's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing rows of lockers, perfectly preserved as if the team had just left practice. Except the Ridgewood Tigers hadn't left practice. They'd vanished on a team-building trip to Bear Creek Canyon. In 2002, 23 players and 2 assistant coaches. Gone without a trace. Davis took a step inside, his flashlight beam dancing across the room. Something metallic glinted on the floor, and he bent down. A football helmet rolled out from behind the nearest locker row. He picked it up, turning it over in his hands. The visor was cracked, and something dark and dried streaked across the inside padding. Blood. The security officer behind him gasped. "I'm calling the police." Davis barely heard him. His flashlight had found something else. A message scratched into the concrete wall beside the rows of lockers. "We stayed. You left. September 14th, 2002. Coach, Justin's eating my granola again. Davis." Glanced up from his clipboard, suppressing a smile as he surveyed the chartered bus. 23 young men, boys, really, dressed in matching Ridgewood Tigers windbreakers, restless energy vibrating through the vehicle as they wound their way up the mountain roads toward Bear Creek Canyon. Justin Weber, the team's burly right tackle, feigned innocence as Darrell Thompson reached across the aisle, attempting to reclaim his snack. "Weber, one more strike and you're running hills when we get there," Davis called out, his voice stern but eyes betraying amusement. This was what he loved. The camaraderie, the brotherhood he'd cultivated over 3 seasons. At the back of the bus, Malik Jefferson sat alone, headphones covering his ears, gaze fixed out the window at the passing trees. Unlike the others, Ridgewood's star quarterback wasn't participating in the pre-trip excitement. Davis frowned, making his way down the aisle. "Room for an old coach?" he asked, sliding into the seat beside his star player. Malik pulled his headphones down. "Just thinking about plays, Coach." "This weekend isn't about plays," Davis reminded him. "It's about team building. 3 nights in the canyon, no football. Doctor's orders." He tapped Malik's knee. "Everything okay?" Malik hesitated, an uncharacteristic uncertainty crossing his normally confident expression. "You ever been to Bear Creek before?" Davis shook his head. "First time. Assistant Coach Wilson suggested it. His family used to camp there when he was a kid. My cousin went there for a school trip last year," Malik said quietly. "Said some weird things about the place." "Weird like what?" Davis asked, suddenly attentive to the change in his quarterback's demeanor. "Like hikers going missing on the North Trails, like people hearing voices at night." Malik shrugged, embarrassment crossing his features. Probably just ghost stories. From the front of the bus, Assistant Coach Wilson called out, "First view of the canyon coming up, gentlemen." The team pressed against the windows, awed exclamations filling the bus as the vast gorge came into view, morning mist still clinging to the pine trees that blanketed its slopes. Bear Creek Canyon was spectacular and formidable. "Don't worry about ghost stories," Davis said, clapping Malik on the shoulder as he stood to return to his seat. "This weekend is about making this team unstoppable for the championship run. Nothing else." Malik caught his sleeve, fingers gripping with unexpected strength. His eyes, usually bright with confidence, were clouded with something Davis had never seen before. Fear. "Coach," he whispered, voice barely, audible over the rumble of the bus tires. "Promise you won't leave us if something goes wrong." The police had cordoned off the area, but Davis had been permitted to remain as they documented the scene. Detective Herrera, a woman with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, watched him carefully from across the locker room. "You're saying this room shouldn't exist?" she asked, gesturing to the meticulously preserved space around them. "The athletic facilities were redesigned in '98, Davis explained, his voice hollow. "The old locker rooms were demolished. This is like stepping back in time." Forensics technicians photographed the helmet, now sealed in an evidence bag. One of them approached, holding out another discovery. "Found this wedged behind locker 17. In his gloved hands was a Ridgewood Tigers playbook, its blue cover stained and torn. Davis recognized it immediately. He'd designed the plays. Himself spent countless nights perfecting them. "May I?" he asked. Detective Herrera nodded. Davis slipped on a pair of latex gloves and took the playbook with trembling hands. The binding cracked as he opened it. Inside, what had once been carefully drawn diagrams and play sequences were now defaced. Violent X's crossed out entire pages. Formations that had been labeled Tiger Cross and Razor Slant had been renamed in a jagged, unfamiliar handwriting. Escape Play, Survival Formation, Last Man Standing. Davis flipped through the pages, horror building with each turn. The final page had been torn, with only a fragment remaining. On it, in the same manic handwriting, were the words, "Run Formation. Last Stand." "What does this mean to you, Coach?" Herrera asked, watching his reaction closely. "These aren't my notations," Davis whispered. "We never had plays with these names. And this handwriting—" He paused, squinting at a signature scrawled in the margin of one page. "This looks like Malik's writing, but distorted, like he was what?" Terrified, Davis finished. Herrera made a note, then gestured to the message on the wall. "And this accusation? We stayed. You left. What's that about?" Davis swallowed hard. "I was the last one to see them. The team went hiking on the North Trail while I stayed at the campsite with a sprained ankle. When they didn't come back after dark, I called search and rescue." The familiar guilt washed over him anew. 3 weeks of searching, no bodies, no evidence, just gone. "Until now," Herrera said. Davis placed the playbook on a nearby bench and moved deeper into the locker room, inspecting each space as if it might contain another clue. The lockers stood in perfect rows, each bearing a nameplate. Weber, Thompson, Wilson, Jefferson, 25 lockers for 25 missing people. "Could someone have built this as some kind of sick joke?" Davis asked. 6 feet underground, with this level of detail? Herrera shook her head. "This took planning. Resources." Davis stopped at Malik's locker, running his fingers over the nameplate. "May I?" At Herrera's nod, he pulled it open. Empty, except for a single Ridgewood Tigers practice jersey number 12 hanging inside. Malik's number. Davis reached for it, then froze. The white jersey was stained with a dark brown substance, already flaking away with age. More blood. From somewhere beyond the row of lockers, a sound echoed in the silent room, the soft shuffle of movement. Davis turned sharply. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Herrera's hand moved to her holster. "Everyone out," she ordered the forensics team. "Now." The technicians backed toward the door as Herrera drew her weapon, motioning for Davis to get behind her. The shuffling came again, more distinct, like footsteps, hesitant and dragging, from the shower area beyond the lockers. "Police, identify yourself," Herrera called, voice steady despite the tension filling the room. Silence answered. Then, from the darkness beyond, another step. September 14, 2002. Evening. The campfire cast long shadows across the clearing as the team finished the last of the hot dogs and marshmallows. Night had settled fully over Bear Creek Canyon, the surrounding woods a wall of darkness beyond their circle of light. Davis sat on a camp chair, his ankle elevated on a cooler, clipboard in hand despite his promise of no football talk. "All right, lights out in 30, Assistant Coach Wilson announced, checking his watch. "Tomorrow's hike starts early." Players groaned good-naturedly, reluctant to end the rare moment of relaxation in their grueling season schedule. Justin Weber stood, stretching his 6'4" frame. "Before we turn in, who wants to hear something interesting about this place?" he asked, a mischievous glint in his eye. Davis recognized the look. "Weber, no ghost stories." "Not a ghost story, Coach," Weber insisted. "Just local history. My dad used to be a ranger here." The team huddled closer to the fire, faces eager in the flickering light. Even Malik, who had been withdrawn all day, leaned forward. "Bear Creek has a trail on the north side that's been closed for decades," Weber began, his voice dropping dramatically. "They'll tell you it's because of rock slides, but my dad said it's because of what happened to the survey team in 78. 6 men went up to map the trail. Only one came back, babbling about voices in the rocks and how the others had stayed behind willingly." "That's bull," Darrell Thompson interjected, though he'd pulled his sleeping bag tighter around his shoulders. "The survivor killed himself a week later," Weber continued, undeterred. "Left a note saying, 'They're coming for me.'" Assistant Coach Wilson rolled his eyes. "Enough, Weber. You'll have everyone sleeping with their cleats on." But the damage was done. A nervous energy had settled over the camp, players glancing toward the darkness beyond their fire. Davis noticed Malik staring intently at the tree line, as if expecting something to emerge. "Wilson's right," Davis announced, standing with effort. "Everyone get some sleep, and stay within the campground. The North Trail is off limits." As the team dispersed to their tents, Malik lingered by the fire. "Coach, Weber wasn't making that up." "That's the same story my cousin told me." Davis sighed. "Every camping spot in America has an urban legend, Malik. Part of the experience. What if we just packed up? Went somewhere else for the weekend?" There was an urgency in Malik's voice that Davis had never heard before. 25 people, 9 tents, already set up for the night? "Not happening, son." Davis squeezed his shoulder reassuringly. "Get some sleep. You'll laugh about this tomorrow." Malik nodded reluctantly and headed for the tent he shared with 3 other players. Davis watched him go, a flicker of unease settling in his stomach. In 3 years of coaching Malik, he'd never seen the young man rattled. Not during championship games, not facing the toughest defenses in the state. Davis didn't sleep well that night. The wind through the canyon created strange acoustics, whispers and echoes that played tricks on the mind. Just after 2 a.m., he jolted awake at a sound that cut through the ambient noise, a single, distant scream. He sat up, listening intently, but it didn't repeat. Probably a dream or an animal. Still, he pulled on his jacket and limped outside, scanning the quiet campsite. All was still. The tents stood in orderly rows, undisturbed, except one. The tent Malik shared with Weber, Thompson, and Riley had its flap open, fluttering slightly in the night breeze. Davis approached, peering inside. 3 sleeping bags, 3 sleeping players. Malik's space was empty. By morning, when Malik hadn't returned, Davis had roused the camp. A quick search of the immediate area yielded nothing. The bus driver, who slept in the bus each night, reported seeing no sign of him. Maybe he took a walk to clear his head, Assistant Coach Wilson suggested, though concern had etched itself across his features. We'll split up, check the permitted trails. He can't have gone far. As the search parties prepared to leave, Davis approached the bus driver. Mr. Hayes, you're certain you didn't see anyone last night? The bus is parked right at the trailhead. Hayes, a thin man in his 60s, shook his head firmly. Not a soul, Coach. I'm a light sleeper, and I keep the bus locked up tight. Your boy never came back to camp. The words sent a chill through Davis that had nothing to do with the morning air. Never came back. As if Malik had left deliberately. As if he had never intended to return. 10. 3 days after the discovery, the retirement community where Alan Hayes now lived was 50 miles from Ridgewood, a collection of modest bungalows surrounding a small artificial lake. Davis sat in his car for 10 minutes before working up the nerve to approach the door of Unit 17. The man who answered was a diminished version of the bus driver Davis remembered. 8 years had bent his once straight posture and clouded his eyes, but recognition flashed immediately across his weathered face. I knew you'd come eventually, Hayes said, stepping aside. Been waiting since I saw the news. The small living room was neat but sparse. A recliner positioned before a television, walls bare except for a single photograph of a younger Hayes standing beside a school bus. No family pictures, no personal touches. I'm not here to blame you, Davis said, taking a seat in the offered chair. I just need to understand what happened. Hayes settled into his recliner, hands fidgeting with the remote control. What did they find in that room? You know about the room. Davis leaned forward, pulse quickening. I know they were planning something. Heard them talking about it on the ride up. Hayes wouldn't meet his eyes. Special room, safe room, they called it, but I didn't know they'd actually built it. Who was talking about it? Jefferson, your quarterback, and that assistant coach, Wilson. They kept it quiet, but bus drivers hear everything. Hayes set down the remote, his hands trembling now. They knew something about that canyon. Something bad, Davis's mind raced. Malik and Wilson conspiring? It didn't make sense. Why didn't you mention this during the investigation? Hayes laughed, a bitter sound. Who'd believe me? The old bus driver spinning tales while 25 people were missing? Besides, he trailed off, shame crossing his features. Besides what? Davis pressed. I wasn't supposed to be there when it happened, Hayes whispered. I was supposed to leave Friday night, not Sunday. New driver coming for pickup, but the company messed up the schedule. A cold feeling spread through Davis's chest. What are you saying? Hayes stood suddenly, crossing to a small desk in the corner. He removed a yellowed envelope from the drawer and handed it to Davis. I wrote this a month after it happened. Couldn't mail it, couldn't tell anyone. His voice cracked. I drove away that day. When you were out searching the trails with the Rangers, I drove away alone. Davis stared at the envelope. His name was written on the front in faded blue ink. Why? It was all he could manage. They scared me, Coach. I heard things that night, too. Voices that shouldn't have been there. And the way your team started acting after Jefferson disappeared. Hayes shuddered. I'd been driving teams for 30 years. Never saw anything like it. The way they looked at the canyon, like they were listening to something we couldn't hear. Davis opened the envelope with unsteady fingers, unfolded the pages inside. A confession, handwritten on motel stationery. I, Alan Hayes, am responsible for abandoning the search effort on Sunday, September 16, 2002, without authorization or notice. I observed behavior among the remaining team members that suggested. Davis skimmed the rambling account, Hayes describing. Players wandering off in groups, assistant Coach Wilson becoming increasingly erratic, strange markings appearing on the team's equipment. The final paragraph made his blood run cold. As I drove away, I kept checking my mirrors, expecting to see someone chasing the bus. Instead, I saw them gathered at the trailhead. All of them, standing perfectly still, watching me leave. Not calling. Out. Not running for help. Just watching, their faces blank. In my rearview mirror, they looked like they were still waving goodbye. Davis looked up, finding Hayes staring out the window toward the artificial lake. "Why come forward now?" he asked. "Because they found something, didn't they? That room. That message." Hayes turned, his eyes suddenly clear and focused. "It means they're still out there, and they've been waiting." Davis stood, the confession clutched in his hand. "I need to get back to the site." As he reached the door, Hayes called after him. "Coach Davis, that day, when I drove away, I looked back one last time at the edge of the canyon road. There was someone standing there watching the bus leave. Just one person." "Who?" Davis asked, though something in him already knew the answer. "Your quarterback, Jefferson, the one who disappeared the night before." By the time Davis returned to campus, night had fallen. The excavation site was surrounded by police tape, but the forensics team had concluded their initial assessment. A lone security guard nodded at Davis. The coach's involvement had been cleared by Detective Herrera. "Find anything else?" Davis asked as he ducked under the tape. "They bagged up a bunch of stuff. Personal effects, mostly. Jerseys, shoes." The guard shrugged. "Detective said you could look around, but don't touch anything that seems important." The battery-powered flood lamps cast harsh shadows as Davis descended the concrete steps into the impossible locker room. The air felt thicker now, the coppery smell stronger. Or perhaps it was just his imagination, fueled by Hayes's disturbing us account. The message on the wall seemed to have deepened, the scratches more pronounced. "We stayed. You left." Davis moved methodically through the space, examining each locker more carefully than before. Most contained typical athletic detritus, forgotten socks, deodorant sticks, protein bar wrappers, items that shouldn't have survived 8 years, without deteriorating more. When he reached Assistant Coach Wilson's office, a small alcove at the back of the room, Davis paused. Unlike the players' spaces, this one had been deliberately arranged. The desk was clear except for a single dry erase board, the kind Wilson had used for quick play. Diagrams, on it a list of names. 25 names including Wilson's own, with check marks beside 24 of them. Only one name had no mark: Coach Ben Davis. Below the list, in Wilson's precise handwriting, "Commitment secured." What had Wilson been planning? And how had he convinced the entire team to participate? A ceiling vent above the desk caught Davis's attention. It was slightly ajar, the screws loosened. Standing on the desk chair, he reached up and removed the grate. Something fell, clattering onto the desk. A cassette tape, labeled in Wilson's handwriting, "Final Huddle, 9/16/02. Davis's hands shook as he searched the desk drawers, finding an old tape player inside, the same model Wilson had used to record and study game footage. He inserted the cassette and pressed play, holding his breath. Static filled the small office, then cleared. Heavy breathing. Multiple people in a small space. "Everybody here?" Wilson's voice, tense but controlled. Except Coach Davis. Malik's voice, surprisingly steady. "We stick to the plan," Wilson continued. "They've chosen us, all of us." "But Coach," another voice, Weber's, cut in. "Coach has his own path," Wilson interrupted. "He'll understand someday." Shuffling noises, more breathing. Then Malik again. "We should leave him something, an explanation." "The playbook," someone suggested. "He'll understand the playbook." A pause. When Wilson spoke again, his voice had changed, deeper, almost reverent. "It's time. They're waiting for us." More movement. The sound of a door opening. "Coach." Malik's voice again, suddenly close to the recorder, as if he'd stayed behind momentarily. "They're not letting us leave." Pause. 3 distinct knocks. Then silence. Davis rewound the tape, playing that final section again. "They're not letting us leave." Did Malik sound afraid? Or was there something else in his tone? Acceptance. Relief. The tape ended with those 3 knocks. Davis stared at the wall, trying to piece it together. Hayes's account of the team behaving strangely. The playbook with its manic notations. Wilson's list with the check marks. Commitment secured. A realization struck him. Davis hurried back to the main locker room, counting the lockers again. 25. 1 for each missing person. Except there was a 26th locker, tucked in the corner, unmarked. Davis approached it slowly, every instinct screaming to turn. Back. The metal was cold under his fingers as he pulled the handle. Inside, a Ridgewood Tigers coaching jacket. His jacket, the one he'd left in his tent that final morning before joining the search parties. Pinned to it was a note in Malik's handwriting. "You'll come back when you're ready, Coach. We'll be waiting." September the 16th, 2002, the last day. The campsite had transformed in the 36 hours since Malik's disappearance. What had begun as concern had shifted to something else, a strange, quiet focus that had settled over the team. Davis watched them from his camp chair, unease growing as they packed up their gear with mechanical precision. Search and rescue teams had combed the permitted trails the day before, finding no trace of Malik. The park rangers had advised waiting for a more extensive search party due to arrive that afternoon. Davis had agreed, though a sense of dread had been building steadily since the scream in the night. "We should head to the North Trail," Assistant Coach Wilson said quietly, appearing beside Davis's chair. The official search missed something. Davis looked up in surprise. "The North Trail is closed, and how would you know what they missed?" Wilson's expression was placid, but his eyes held an intensity Davis had never seen before. "The boys want to try. They think they know where Malik went." Davis gestured to his ankle, still wrapped and swollen. "I can't make that hike, and we're not splitting up again." "You stay with the bus," Wilson said. "We'll be back by noon." Before Davis could protest further, Wilson had walked away, gathering the team with a low whistle. Davis watched, bewildered, as they huddled together, Wilson speaking too quietly for Davis to hear. 22 young men and assistant Coach Reed nodded in unison. As they prepared to leave, Davis called out, "2 hours, then I'm calling the Rangers again." The team filed past his chair, each player pausing briefly beside him. None spoke. Their expressions were unnervingly serene, even as they headed toward a restricted trail to search for their missing teammate. Justin Weber was the last in line. He stopped, crouching beside Davis's chair. "Weber, talk sense into them," Davis pleaded. "This isn't right." Weber's usual boisterous energy was gone, replaced by the same calm that had overtaken the others. "It's okay, Coach. We found something. Yesterday. Something Malik wanted us to see." "What are you talking about?" Davis grabbed his arm. "What did you find?" Weber gently removed Davis's hand. "A way in," he said simply. Then he stood and followed the others toward the tree line. Davis watched helplessly as they disappeared into the dense forest, Wilson leading the way with uncanny confidence for someone who'd never visited the canyon before. Davis checked his watch, marking the time. 2 hours, he'd promised. Then he would call for help. An hour passed, then another. Davis's calls into the forest went unanswered. When the park ranger finally arrived at noon, Davis was frantic. 24 people, he explained, pointing toward the North Trail. They went looking for a player who disappeared Friday night. The search began immediately, but even with additional rangers called in, there was no sign of the team on the North Trail, or any trail. As day turned to evening, Davis sat by the empty campfire pit, Hayes the bus driver beside him. "They'll find them," Hayes said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Probably just got turned around." Davis didn't respond. He was replaying the morning in his mind, the strange calm that had settled over the team, Wilson's certainty about the North Trail, Weber's cryptic words. A way in. When the ranger approached at dusk, his expression confirmed what Davis already feared. "Nothing, Coach. Not a footprint, not a broken branch. It's like they vanished into thin air." 3 days later, after Hayes had abandoned the site and additional search teams had found nothing, Davis made a final trek to the North Trail entrance, before being evacuated from the canyon. Standing alone at the trailhead, he'd called out one last time, "Malik, Wilson, anybody." For a moment, the canyon had seemed to hold its breath. Then, in the distance, a figure had appeared on the trail, too far to identify clearly, but Davis would swear it was Malik's distinctive silhouette. The figure had raised a hand, not waving, but as if reaching out. Davis had started forward, his injured ankle forgotten, when the ranger had grabbed his arm. "Coach, we need to go. Storm's coming." When Davis looked back, the figure was gone. But he'd seen Malik's lips move, forming words Davis couldn't hear. Now, 8 years later, sitting in the impossible locker room with the tape recorder still hissing static beside him, Davis finally understood what Malik had been trying to tell him. "Don't follow." Detective Herrera's voicemail had been blunt. The forensics team had found nothing conclusive. Hair and blood samples matched missing team members, but there was no explanation for how the room had been constructed, or by whom. Carbon dating placed the materials at approximately 8 years old, exactly when the team had vanished. The case remained officially a mystery. Davis stood alone in the locker room, Hayes's confession letter in one pocket, the cassette tape in the other. The investigations would continue, but he knew they would find nothing more. The truth wasn't hidden in DNA samples or construction permits. He approached Malik's locker one last time, running his fingers over the nameplate. Inside, he placed the bloodied helmet they'd found on the first day. "I'm sorry I left," he whispered, to the empty room. "I'm sorry I didn't understand." What had happened at Bear Creek Canyon? Had the team succumbed to some mass delusion led by Wilson and Malik? Had they deliberately hidden themselves away, creating this underground shrine to their disappearance? Or was Weber's campfire story more than legend? Had something in that canyon called to them, something that had been waiting for the right 25 people to answer? Davis closed the locker door with a decisive click. He had his answer, even if he didn't fully understand it. They had stayed, willingly or under compulsion, and he had left. Whatever bound them now was beyond his reach. As he turned to leave, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A text message from an unknown number, listed only as disconnected. "You left." Again! Davis froze, staring at the screen. Another message appeared, "But you can still join us, Coach." His hands trembled as he typed a response. "Where are you?" The reply came instantly. "Where we've always been, waiting." Davis looked back over his shoulder. At the far end of the row, Malik's locker door slowly creaked open. End.